Legend of Exorcism. Chapter 27. Nightingale of the Spring Dawn. The autumn wind was bleak as twilight fell. The members of the exorcism department excitedly followed behind Li Jinglong as they went to the brothel following the imperial decree. In a bit, restrain yourselves a little, Li Jinglong specially commanded. Ai ya. Captain Li. No, it's Li Zhenqi. Nightingale of the Spring Dawn was the biggest and most luxurious entertainment house and brothel in Chang'an, and it looked down on even the scholarly Yishilan. This place was filled with the tinkling of the cherry red, willow green realm. His manner became smug and self-confident. Today I won't be playing, A Tai said. I'll listen to you all instead. The gathered women were left disappointed beyond belief as the old proprietress showed the five of them to the most grandiose, luxurious seats in the entire hall. When Li Jinglong walked through, the song and dance in the hall had yet to begin and the customers were laughing and chatting up a storm, but when they saw Li Jinglong pass by, they all quieted. When Li Jinglong passed by the side of Nightingale of the Spring Dawn, he purposefully pressed close to the large pool where several koi fish were kept. He deftly shook the cloth bag, sending the carp yao into the pool. Have fun playing around, Li Jinglong said. Thank you. The carp yao stuck out his head from the water, before diving back in with a smug and self-confident manner into the school of fish. The fish were startled and fled in all four directions, and the carp yao hugged one of the koi, shouting, "Don't go, beauty!" Not long after, the buzz of chatter came back once again. The hot topic of conversation throughout all of Chang'an was naturally what had happened at the imperial examinations, and with Li Jinglong catching the yaos, the whole city was in an uproar. The news could not be stopped, and it traveled at light speed. Rumors were rumors, and everywhere resounded with speculation about this group of people. The servant led them to the largest seating area in the hall before setting up a screen and inviting them to sit down. 3 of them were to the left, while 2 were to the right. Chu Yangxi and A Tai sat on one side, while Li Jinglong, Hung Jun, and Mo Rijin sat on the other. Li Jinglong then asked for another smaller screen to be brought over to block off the left and the right, completely hiding A Tai and Chu Yangxi, the 2 who often went to brothels, from the rest, to prevent young children from learning bad habits. The 3 of them directly faced that glittering hall, which covered almost a half-acre and was decorated in an extremely luxurious and ornate fashion. Despite the folding screen being erected, the sound of women laughing and talking floated over to them. When Hung Jun lifted his head once again, he saw that of the 3 levels of Nightingale of the Spring Dawn, each was taller than the last, and there were even wooden bridges constructed overhead. On those bridges hung a variety of bright lanterns, and the entire scene looked like a dreamscape. Young masters, which of our girls are you looking favorably upon? None, Li Jinglong crisply rejected the old proprietress. Then let the girls. Li Jinglong, no need. The other 2 young masters, do you need? Li Jinglong, not necessary. Hung Jun. Mo Rijin. What did we come here for? Hung Jun asked Mo Rijin. Mo Rijin felt this was very amusing, and he responded, you have to ask Zhenqi that, I don't know. Li Jinglong was eating the grapes on the table. He answered, listen to music, watch the dances, spend some money, and after that, we'll go back to the exorcism department to sleep. Hung Jun asked, in a bit, will there be people dancing? Li Jinglong, yes, and there'll be qin players too. Mo Rijin, if you want to find a girl, go sit on the other side of the screen. Mo Rijin smiled. I told you that I need to save my first time. Tonight I'm only here to listen to the qin and the music. Save it. Li Jinglong was a little taken aback. Mo Rijin thought for a moment before he nodded, and Li Jinglong didn't bother asking any more. Mo Rijin then continued, Zhenqi won't let Hung Jun. He doesn't need to. Li Jinglong mercilessly cut off Mo Rijin's sentence, before looking at Hung Jun and asking, am I right? Hung Jun thought of what Li Jinglong had explained to him that night. Originally he had been a little amused, but now that a bucket of cold water had been poured on him, he couldn't resist retaliating slightly, so he said, "Actually I could also use some." "Then go sit next door." Li Jinglong pointed at Chu Yangxi and A Tai. "This side is for the proper people. Do you want to sit with us or go next door?" Hung Jun thought about it, but he could only admit defeat, and he said, "I'll stay here." Li Jinglong said, "Think about it well, you're not allowed to change seats again. In a little bit we're going to eat cherry beluo." Hung Jun, "What? Eat what? What are cherry beluo? I'm not going to that side anymore, so, can I have a little wine?" Drinking wine was all right, and Li Jinglong gladly ordered some food and wine before sending the servant to the store that General Han had opened next door to buy some cherry beluo. Hung Jun was as easy to please as ever. Of the two pleasures in life of food and lust, he didn't care for lust when food would appease him just as easily, let alone when everything Li Jinglong spoke of sounded very tasty. "But young masters, in a bit when the song and dance start, there must be someone to attend to you and pour the wine." The old proprietress came by again. She asked, "How about we find one for you who will sit properly in the corner?" Li Jinglong was just about to refuse, but Hung Jun suddenly remembered something, and he asked the old proprietress, "Do you know Sanger?" The old proprietress immediately responded with, "Yes, yes, I do," before turning and chiding someone to get her, and Li Jinglong could only sit back and let things happen. Hung Jun said, "I definitely won't try to do anything here." "You seem to understand pretty well," Mo Rijin smiled. In a flash Sanger hurried over, and Hung Jun greeted her. At the heart of it, Sanger was the first friend that he had made when he came to Chang'an, and seeing her again made him very happy. Technically, Sanger was only one of the numerous attendants for the girls in Nightingale of the Spring Dawn, and she had never expected a customer to request her specifically, and on top of that, a top-level patron at that, so she was also inordinately pleased. When the two of them saw each other, they both started smiling. Sanger looked at Li Jinglong before looking back at Hung Jun, and Li Jinglong was filled with suspicion. How exactly was Hung Jun connected with this Sanger? Suddenly, Sanger spoke, "Yo, it's Captain Li. You two got together. When did you get close with him?" Li Jinglong was currently drinking water, and at that moment he spat it all out. To the side, Mo Rijin was laughing so hard he slumped sideways on the table. "We've been together for a long time." Hung Jun smiled. "Sanger, how about you come here and pour wine for us? I'll give you money." Sanger grinned as she knelt on the seating area, lifting up the pitcher and beginning to pour out the wine. In that pitcher was an excellent Lanling Daque, which had been brewed to an amber color. When it was poured out in a white porcelain bowl, the scent of the wine wafted through the air, perfectly matching the phrase, "Lanling's fine wine is like a tulip, in a jade bowl it produces an amber light." This was the best wine they had in the establishment. "Don't drink too much," Li Jinglong commanded Hung Jun. "This wine is strong." Mo Rijin was eating some of the dried fruits, and he remarked amusedly, "Isn't this vinegar?" Sanger said, "How could it be? This is the best wine we have." Mo Rijin rubbed his nose and said, "But why is it that I always feel this area around us smells pretty sour?" Li Jinglong. Sanger understood what Mo Rijin was hinting at, and she also began to smile as she hurried to say, "Young master, if you could move over a little." Li Jinglong said, "Mo Rijin, you." Sanger kept shooing Hung Jun towards Li Jinglong's side before moving her seat over, sitting next to Mo Rijin, and Mo Rijin smiled. "Now, this is more like it. Hung Jun." They shifted so that Hung Jun was sitting right next to Li Jinglong, and he had to lean over a bit to talk with Sanger. His back was resting against half of Li Jinglong's body, and Li Jinglong let Hung Jun lean up against him, saying nothing more. Not long after, the servant brought out the cherry beluo that he had bought, and everyone let out a "wa" sound. Those cherry beluo were made with preserved cherries as the main filling, and within the egg-based shell was wrapped roasted lamb tenderloin meat, fresh cheese, thin strands of okra, vegetable centers, and similar fillings. The entire thing was steamed until it was cooked through, before chopped mint leaves were sprinkled on top. It was delicious, sweet, savory, and tasty, and in the mouth it didn't feel too rich. What tasty thing did you get? Chu Yongxi stuck his head out from next door to look, and what he saw was truly amazing. He hurried to ask, from General Han's. Only this table has it, Li Jinglong responded coldly. If you want to eat it, go buy your own. Li Jinglong had bought 4 portions, but he hadn't expected Sanger to join them, so he could only give a portion to her as well. After Hung Jun inhaled his portion, he asked, "Is there more? Let's get some more." Instead, Li Jinglong handed his own portion over for him to eat before turning his head to look over the great hall, thinking in his heart, why haven't they started yet? And when he turned his head back around to look at Hung Jun, that other cherry billuo had also vanished. "Is there more?" Hung Jun asked again. "Are you learning from Zhao Zilong?" Li Jinglong said. "Swallowing things whole when you eat." Hung Jun said, "But I finished it." Li Jinglong could only respond, "There's no more. I can't let you eat until you're satisfied, so that you keep thinking of it." Hung Jun could only take it as it was, and he began to wonder if he would be able to get the half that Mo Rijin still had in his hand, but Mo Rijin had already nearly finished his own. Li Jinglong said, "There are so many delicious things in the world. Someday I'll take you to go try them all out slowly." Up on the 2nd and 3rd floors above their heads, the servants had already passed by and extinguished the lanterns. The hall dimmed accordingly, and the chatter ceased. In the darkness, a ding resounded, and the entire hall fell silent. Soon after that, a pipa began to play, and that music was like flowing water. The continued strumming was like white snow thundering down a tall mountain in an avalanche, turning into millions of water droplets, raining down onto the audience. When it ceased to sound, several more pipa began to play, blending seamlessly with that lead pipa, as if hundreds of birds were following after the phoenix as they continued to strum. That sound enveloped the entire hall and echoed upwards into the sky above. After hearing these talented 10 fingers plucking the strings, everyone let out cheers and began to applaud. Hung Jun had long since forgotten what he wanted to say as he hurried to turn and peer into the hall, his eyes filled with joy. It really sounded too good. A bird's warble sounded. It was a Kaoji performer. Soon after, all the folding screens successively lit up, and the girls who had been waiting beneath the folding screens each lifted up the glazed bowl they had in their hands. In each bowl was a light, and the multicolored lights left the folding screens, walking towards the center of the hall with rapid steps. On the 2nd and 3rd floors, the accompanying dancers revealed themselves one by one. With their uniform beauty and their uniform dance of the warblers, their hands holding lanterns, their waists tied with satin, they descended from the heights with a shua sound. This was the first time in Hung Jun's life that he had seen such a scene. Li Jinglong explained to him, "Nightingale of the spring dawn, just like its name." The richly decorated glazed glass bowls twinkled like the light of spring, and the dancers twirled around in front of the long seating area that they were on, sweet smiles on their faces. Some people in the hall had seen this dance before, but they couldn't resist cheering anyways. Hung Jun exclaimed, "This is too beautiful." As if hundreds of birds were welcoming the spring, and life was springing up abundantly, the dancers carrying the glass bowls first gathered in the middle, before spreading out to the sides, revealing a folding screen that looked more like something from a revolving scenic lantern. Behind that folding screen was the shadow of a graceful person holding a pipa in their hand. It was indeed the concert master of the music earlier. A round of pipa sounds once again resounded, and that woman gently opened her lips and began to sing. In the morning rain and light dust of Wei City, the inn was as green as the green willows. Hung Jun. That piece was called The 3 Refrains of Yang Pass, and it was a musical piece that had been most widely popularized recently in Chang'an. Though it had been played countless times, This beautiful spring scene, where the shadows on the sides slowly disappeared under the light, lent it a completely new flavor. Sanger bent over and shuffled away to get more wine. Hung Jun felt that he was a little tipsy, and he leaned against Li Jinglong's shoulder, dazedly watching that woman on the pipa, singing along softly, "I urge this gentleman to have another cup of wine." One of Li Jinglong's hands was on the table, gently tapping against the side of Hung Jun's hand as the two of them sang in unison under their breaths, "Going east out of Yang Pass, there are no enemies." The stage that the pipa woman sat on was slowly pushed towards Li Jinglong's and Hung Jun's area under the combined efforts of the group of the women, and as the song ended she blended it with another piece. Her gentle voice sang, "The grasses in the north are as green as jade, and the mulberries lower their green branches." Li Bai. It's one of Li Bai's. Upon hearing his idol's poem, Hung Jun immediately grew excited. Li Jinglong couldn't resist smiling at that, and he put one hand on Hung Jun's shoulder. The pipa woman had been pushed until she was in front of their seat, and she stared into Hung Jun's eyes as she sang, "When you recall the days of the past, it is time for my heart to break." Hung Jun began to smile as well. This was really too pleasing for both the eye and the heart. Li Jinglong saw that pipa woman's smile that she tossed at them, and his face once again shuddered. "Since I do not know the spring wind, why does it part the curtains by my bed?" After singing this line, that beautiful pipa player lowered her head, and in her gaze was a hint of grief. Her voice was sweet, and the platform she sat on retreated backwards. In this moment everyone in the hall loudly applauded, and just as they were about to give tips to the performers, that pipa woman suddenly smiled. Above their heads, a fire roared into existence, and Hung Jun was so startled that he jumped and lifted his gaze up. It was just the servants lighting up that huge revolving scenic lantern hanging from the third floor. Once the revolving scenic lantern was lit, the entirety of the main hall of Nightingale of the Spring Dawn was illuminated brightly, and countless singing birds appeared on the folding screens, creating a contrast with the dim scene right before. As the revolving scenic lantern slowly spun, it was as if countless birds flew by around it. When Hung Jun lowered his head again, he saw that pipa player had already gone behind that turning platform, which was slowly revolving, revealing a thin, tall, middle-aged man, with a pipa held in his hand. The accompanying dancers also took their leave, and the brightly lit hall became this middle-aged man's stage. That man seemed to have no wish to flaunt his musical skills, and he simply stroked one hand over the pipa strings, letting out countless flowing notes before he sang, "The red flowers grow in the southern country, how many will sprout in the spring? I hope that you will pluck many as a symbol of our mutual yearning." In an instant Hung Jun was enthralled. This person's singing voice was completely different from Atai's, where Atai's voice was clear and limpid, this man's voice was heavy and hoarse. But when he sang, it was similar to Atai in that there was a certain feeling of it piercing directly into a person's heart, sending tingles all over his scalp. Li Ginayan. In Nightingale of the Spring Dawn, all of the guests were in an uproar. Some people shouted out that musical master's name, but they were quickly hushed by the other people around them. Behind the dividing screen next to them, there suddenly came the sound of a plate being overturned. Hung Jun asked Li Jinglong, "He sings so well. Who is he?" "Li Ginayan," Li Jinglong responded promptly as he smiled and watched Li Ginayan. That person was indeed the capital's #1 musician, Li Ginayan, and when he saw Li Jinglong, he nodded and smiled. Hung Jun exclaimed, "You guys know each other?" "N." Li Jinglong leaned on the folding screen as he threw one arm over Hung Jun, making him lean a little closer, and he lazily said, "This fellow usually doesn't come to Nightingale of the Spring Dawn to play, but today he came to give me some face." It was now that Hung Jun finally understood, Li Ginayan had been specially invited by Li Jinglong. Li Ginayan once again strummed the strings, but this time he started up with the line, "In spring the river rises as high as the sea, the bright moon over the sea seemed to be born of the tide, after following the ripples of light on the waves for thousands of li, where does the river in spring exist without the light of the moon? Up above, the revolving scenic lantern dimmed once again as the group of women crowded over, lining up behind Li Guinan, each of them holding a pipa in their hand as they joined in. Li Guinan's deep voice wove together with the harmony of the pipa chorus, as if the tide gently carried them, and a round of bright lanterns and the moon lit up the spring night for thousands of li. Hung Jun listened in complete rapture, until the quarter moon quietly hides away in the sea fog, and the roads between Jiaxi and Xiaoxiang are unlimited. Then, Li Guinan paused to take a breath, before continuing, who knows how many will return by the light of the moon, the setting moon scatters yearning all over the trees by the river. The pipa slowly faded away, and Hung Jun's heart seemed to follow the ebb and flow of the tide, slowly settling back into place. The great hall also slowly darkened. Tonight can I go find him to play? Li Guinan doesn't sell his body, Li Jinglong said a little tipsily. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I want to ask him to teach me the arts, Hung Jun excitedly said. He sings too well. Have you already forgotten me? A Tai asked mournfully from the other side of the folding screen. Hung Jun smiled. I really wish there could be a day where you two performed on the same stage. I'm sure all of Chang'an would never stop talking about it. I can't compare to him, A Tai said. Chu Yangxi said, Zhenqi, you recognize Li Guinan? I've never heard you mention it before. Li Jinglong said, in previous years when he hadn't yet become famous, I often used to spend money to support his performances, that's all. Now that he's a famous royal musician, I can't afford him anymore, but all I had to do was to throw away my face to coax him out to play a few songs. The hall once again lit up, and this time a chorus of musical instruments started playing at once. The girls in the hall began to dance, fluttering their sleeves and twirling their clothing about. Now that Li Guinan had showed his face, the rest of tonight's songs and dances waned ordinary in comparison. Hung Jun kept recalling Li Guinan's A spring night on the flower-filled, moonlit river, and it was as if he had lost his heart to it. When the second gang came, the entertainment finally came to an end as Chang'an entered its customary curfew. The customers couldn't win against the strength of that liquor, and one by one they hugged someone as they were carried up to the second and third floors to sleep. Over the course of that one night, Hung Jun had managed to drink the wine as if it was water, and he was so drunk that he was slumped over the table. Li Jinglong shook him gently, asking, should we go back? Chu Yangxi came over to look, but Li Jinglong indicated that he was free to go as he pleased. Origin turned to look at the autumn moon. Li Jinglong wanted to carry Hung Jun back, but he felt that tonight was cold, so he could only gather up a few folding screens around them in the hall and make do for the night. Hung Jun, stinking of alcohol, lifted his eyes up to look at Li Jinglong, and he said, Zhenqi. The alcohol was also affecting Li Jinglong, and he asked, do you want some water? You, return my heart lamp, Hung Jun smiled and said, I want to go home. Li Jinglong. Hung Jun then rolled over again and fell asleep. Li Jinglong was helpless to do anything, so he tugged his robes around him a little more before he laid down at Hung Jun's side and fell asleep, the two of them lying shoulder to shoulder. It was almost time for the sky to brighten, and Origin had gone off to who knows where when Li Jinglong patted Hung Jun. The alcohol had worn off a little, and he had Hung Jun come back with him. When the two of them rode their horses over the bridge of 9 turnings, Li Jinglong purposefully slowed down a little, and seeing that Hung Jun made no protest, asked, do you want to get down and walk a little? The autumn morning was thick with fog, and the alcohol had just worn off for Hung Jun, so when he felt the cold wind he just wanted to vomit. He went to the bottom of the bridge of 9 turnings to do so. When he turned his head back, Li Jinglong handed over a bamboo tube with water to let him rinse his mouth, and after rinsing, Hung Jun stumbled back up. When he made it under the maple tree, he suddenly thought of his home. Yesterday night, the scene of the hundreds of birds flying about and the nightingales singing in unison reminded him of that smear of golden clouds around Yajin Palace, and he grew unavoidably sad. Is it because I smashed your heart lamp, so now you can't go home? Li Jinglong's forehead was faintly wrinkled as he looked over Hung Jun. Li Jinglong had him sit below the tree for a bit while he waited for the market's food stalls to open so that they could have breakfast before they went back. Just as he had been previously, Hung Jun was still dazed from the alcohol, and he said to Li Jinglong, "I'll take you back to my house to play. In the back mountains there are so many birds." Li Jinglong began to smile, and he asked, "When should we go?" Hung Jun responded, "We'll leave early tomorrow." Hung Jun sprawled all of himself on Li Jinglong's body, and Li Jinglong could only let him, he didn't want to push him away again. Under the bridge of 9 turnings the maple leaves danced, and as Hung Jun pressed down on Li Jinglong, his face rubbed against his chest, and he felt extremely comfortable. When he was small he had also sprawled like this on the tree fork to take his afternoon nap, like a jaguar hanging off the tree, and when the wind blew, the leaves let out sha-sha sounds as they rubbed against each other, filling the atmosphere with elegance and freedom. Li Jinglong's head began to hurt, and he said, "Don't sleep anymore, let's go back and sleep. Get up." Hung Jun didn't respond. Li Jinglong tilted his head over as well as his breathing roughened, and he too fell asleep under the tree. A horse-drawn carriage passed over the bridge of 9 turnings, letting out quiet noises. In this fog, Lady Kuo, in the carriage, lifted aside the curtain over the window, glancing down towards the bottom of the bridge. Under the sky filled with maple leaves, Li Jinglong leaned up against the tree, with Hung Jun sprawled over him like a dog. "Mistress," a man wearing a cloak said quietly. "What background does he have?" Lady Kuo asked in a deep voice. The man shook his head and responded, "Swanyan specially did some investigating, but was unable to find out his background." Lady Kuo's gaze returned from the bottom of the bridge of 9 turnings, falling instead on that man. The man pulled off the cloak, revealing an especially ugly and ferocious face. The muscles on his face were knotted and lean, and his brows and eyes glinted with maliciousness. The thin sliver of his mouth revealed 4 sharp teeth, and under his neck there was a brand. That burn scar contained the mark of Yazi, one of the 9 sons of the dragon. "Go notify Baxia and Suani," Lady Kuo said darkly. "When the time comes, they will each act separately. Make sure to keep Li Jinglong alive so that we can peel off his skin and hang it outside the city gates of Chang'an." End chapter. Legend of Exorcism. Chapter 28. Frequently occurring murder cases. In the afternoon of the same day, Deputy Chief Huang Yang from the Judiciary Department personally made a visit. Li Zhenqi. Huang Yang had brought along that civil official named Lian Hao, along with a porter who was carrying a lacquer box, delivering the box to the courtyard of the exorcism department. Li Jinglong was currently nursing a hangover, his hair in disarray and his forehead wrinkled as he came out to welcome the guests. After the imperial examination case, the judiciary department didn't dare to roll their eyes at Li Jinglong anymore. He had accomplished an act of service for his country, and he also was in the good graces of the emperor. So Huang Yang greeted him with a face filled with smiles and an amicable attitude as he said, "You haven't gotten up yet? Then it was presumptuous of me to come so early. Of course, your exorcism department must go out at night to catch Yao. Please come in." Li Jinglong had only managed to get Hung Jun back when the sun had risen to the height of 3 bamboo poles. His body had almost come apart under Hung Jun's sprawl, and he could barely keep his eyes open. He said exhaustedly, "No, it was Jinglong who was presumptuous, allow me to change my clothes." "Go sleep," Huang Yang hurried to say. "These are the cases that the judiciary department is transferring to you, and we'll leave them here." Li Jinglong woke up completely at that, and he stared at that chest for a long while before he came back to himself. As he stood there, Huang Yang said, "If you need anything, please let Lian Hao know." Lian Hao hurried to agree, and with Huang Yang in tow, they managed to quickly flee. Li Jinglong bore an expression of consternation as he opened that trunk. Inside, stacked to the brim with no order to them, was a bunch of case records. There were at least 200 scrolls. That day, when everyone woke up, they were all tired but happy. When Hung Jun came out to wash up, he was still singing "In spring the river rises as high as the sea." Everyone was indulging in the delight that was visiting the brothel for entertainment last night. "Let's go play there again tonight, he he he," Chu Yangxi said. Tai responded, "I don't have much money left. Last time those 3,200 taels that I put down haven't been returned to me yet." I have some," Hung Jun said. "Let's go by that place that makes those cherry beluo." Origen said, "Sounds good. That store. We have cases," Li Jinglong said with an expression of abject misery. "Still playing around? We might as well dissolve the department then." After lunch, Hung Jun looked at the pile of case records on the table. Everyone stared at it dumbfounded. "We only tracked down a cat," Origen said. "Is all of this really necessary?" In response, Li Jinglong was the only one who picked out a scroll and unrolled it, and he said, "These are the difficult cases that the Judiciary Department sent us. Go through and read them through once, we'll split up and investigate tomorrow." "Do these all have some connection to Yaogwai?" Hung Jun asked. "How can there be so many Yaogwai?" Chu Yangxi responded. "I imagine this is because we have received the favor of both His Majesty and the favored concubine, so to avoid offending anyone, the cases that they aren't able to solve were all tossed over to us in a flash of their inspiration." Li Jinglong answered, "As long as they're not related to Yaogwai, right reviewed, not Yao related, and send them back to the Judiciary Department. They're not ours to take care of." Hung Jun looked at the scroll in his hand and asked, "A porter named Qin was violently killed in his house during the night, do we not care about this either?" Li Jinglong took it, and after taking a single glance he tossed it to the side as he said, "He was murdered, it wasn't a Yaogwai." Tai said, "On the second day of the 11th month, 4 hanging coins disappeared as if they had grown wings." Chu Yangxi smiled at that, and he supplied, "They were probably stolen by the children in the family to spend. My young son keeps shouting that he sees ghosts at night." Origen held another scroll and read from it. "This should be sent to someone who conducts healing rituals. Why are they coming to the exorcism department? After exiting the city, my mule received a shock and ran off. I think there are Yaogwai involved. Oh, fuck off." Li Jinglong only wished for him and his subordinates to go flatten the Judiciary Department instead. Hung Jun picked up that scroll about the dead man again and said, "If we don't go investigate, then what?" "That's the job of the Judiciary Department," Li Jinglong answered. "If you send it back, they must investigate." Hung Jun said, "Then according to what you guys said, if the Judiciary Department can't afford to offend the killer, this case won't be resolved. Then it can only be left to become a cold case," Chu Yangxi responded. Hung Jun then picked out that scroll about the dead person, placing it on the side. Li Jinglong let out a sigh and said, "Fine, either way you'll be bored otherwise, so if you want to go investigate, then go." Hung Jun grabbed the scroll and headed for the door. Origen wanted to accompany him, but Hung Jun gestured that it wasn't necessary. He changed into his official uniform and went out the door. "I'll go check on him." Li Jinglong couldn't sit still, and he stood up. Everyone else hurried to agree. Yes, Zhenqi you should go check it out, Zhangxi you must go check it out." Li Jinglong. Li Jinglong then crossed his legs and sat down again, crossing his arms over his chest as he said earnestly, "You three, I feel that there is something we must discuss in depth. Do you all have some misunderstanding about me going out of my way to protect Hung Jun?" Hung Jun passed through numerous sections of the city before he arrived in Gi Ward. This area was the slums of Chang'an. The yard walls were broken and dilapidated, the houses were built right next to each other, and there were even puddles of sewage in the alleys. A lone house with its own private entrance had a yard piled high with random second-hand goods, and the interior was calm and quiet. Hung Jun lifted up a drum-shaped rattle that had fallen on the ground, twirling it so that it let out a few dew-dus, before a young person's voice called from the inside, "If you like it then take it and toss some money into the jar." Hung Jun pushed open the door and went in. What he saw was the residence of a poor family in Chang'an. The windows had paper pasted on them, and there was a set of armor tossed out in front of the doorway. That armor was very familiar. It was exactly the set that Li Jinglong had worn before, the armor of the Longwu army. A young man who didn't look much older than Hung Jun sat on the bed, wiping the sword that he held in his hand. When he heard the sound of the door opening, he lifted his head and looked at Hung Jun, his eyes filled with a little confusion. "I'm from the exorcism department, here on business." Hung Jun pulled out the tally around his waist and asked, "The porter who passed away, who was he to you?" This was the first time Hung Jun was investigating a case. He learned that that youth was called Qin Wu, 19 years old, and he was a colleague of Li Jinglong's. Qin Wu set the sword in his hand to one side, frowning. "The exorcism department? Isn't that Captain Li's department? What are you doing here?" Confused, Hung Jun asked, "Wasn't there a porter with the surname Qin who was violently, had something happened to him in the night?" "My dad was murdered." Qin Wu stood up and stared at Hung Jun as he spoke. "Nothing to do with you guys, you can go." But Hung Jun sat down on the bed instead, saying hesitantly, "I'll sit with you for a bit." Qin Wu said, "There's nothing in this house that I can use to welcome you as a guest." "Is Captain Li doing well?" Hung Jun told him that he was doing pretty well, and the two of them sat facing each other for a split second. Qin Wu let out a long sigh, and Hung Jun asked, "Who killed him?" "Someone from the Yang family," Qin Wu replied. "The second procurement official in Yang Qiuzhong's manor, who conspired with my stepmother to strangle him to death at night. There's no way around it, my family's too poor." Hung Jun thought in his heart that this was not far from what Chu Yongxi had guessed. The murderer was someone that the judiciary department didn't dare to offend, so they had pushed this case to the exorcism department, and it seemed that he had made this trip in vain. "What is his name?" Hung Jun couldn't bear it and asked. "Let's go to the judiciary department again." Qin Wu didn't reply, but instead leveled his gaze at Hung Jun and said, "That day, I saw you on the training grounds outside of the Longwu army. Does Captain Li treat you well?" Hung Jun had no idea why he had suddenly switched topics to something so wholly unrelated. He thought about it for a moment before responding, "Zhenqi's a really good person." Qin Wu replied. "Cherish your time together properly, tell him that he doesn't have to worry about me." Hung Jun wanted to ask further, but Qin Wu stood up instead to see his visitor off, so Hung Jun could only head back. Qin Wu was really too calm about it. If it was Hung Jun himself, he would definitely not be able to be like that. Not long after Qin Wu saw Hung Jun off, the door was pushed open again. He was just about to pick up his own sword, but when he turned and saw that it was Li Jinglong, he suddenly stood up. The two of them stared at each other silently from across the darkened room, and finally, Qin Wu said, "Li. Captain Li." When Hung Jun picked out the case, "I guessed that it was your family." Li Jinglong sighed and sat down. He asked, "Where's your stepmother?" "In mourning," Qin Wu replied. 49 days, and as soon as the 7 weeks passes she's going to get married. For now, they've rented a house outside to live in." Li Jinglong let out a sigh and said, "These years the Yang family has gathered a lot of power. This anger is something you'll have to swallow down for the time being." Qin Wu didn't say anything. Finally, Li Jinglong spoke, "As a colleague, here's a word of advice from me. This case is one that I'll keep in the back of my mind, but it's not the right time for it yet. The Yang family only needs to lift a hand to cover the sky, like a dog threatening people under its master's protection," Qin Wu said. "They've tyrannized their fellow officials, forcefully seized fertile land, and beat up innocent women and children. They've embezzled the pay of the 6 armies and the border troops, so until when do I have to bear with them?" Li Jinglong said, People will always experience many unfair things in their lives, but there will always be a day when these knots will be untied, so don't take things to heart. This case I will keep in mind, so let it be like this and nothing more." And having said this, Li Jinglong stood up to leave. Qin Wu only quietly watched his silhouette, but as Li Jinglong went out the door, Qin Wu suddenly spoke. "Captain Li, you're still the same as before." "I'm already not the same as before," Li Jinglong turned his head and said, before he continued on his way out of the Qin house. The next day, the new cases arrived. "Why are there so many?" Hung Jun hadn't even finished reading the ones from yesterday. Everyone was at a loss for words. Li Jinglong said, "Lian Hao, stop right there. There's murder cases today." Lian Hao dropped off another large stack of scrolls before he slipped away like smoke. Everyone felt increasingly bored looking through the cases, so they started to split it up. In the morning, A Tai, Mo Rijin, and Chu Yangxi would look over the case summaries, and in the afternoon Li Jinglong, Hung Jun, and the Carpiao would take over while the others went out to investigate the cases further. Any cases not related to Yaogui were all returned to the Judiciary Department. "Qin Wu asked after you," Hung Jun said that day while he was looking over some cases. "What did he say about me?" Li Jinglong asked absently, shooting Hung Jun a glance from under the scroll. Hung Jun asked curiously, "Were you guys friends before?" Li Jinglong answered, "I guess it counts." Hung Jun looked him in the eyes, and Li Jinglong couldn't resist adding, "Back then, when little Wu entered the Longwu army, he was about the same age as you." At that time, Li Jinglong had just gained the position of captain of the Longwu army, and his martial prowess was something that his subordinates greatly admired. But the second year after he entered the army, a specific matter had occurred, and that matter was related to Qin Wu. "You were betrayed, hey," the Carpiao said as it buried its head in the case scrolls. Li Jinglong ended and said, "Later there was a chance at promotion within the Longwu army, and Qin Wu's family was really too poor, so he wanted to get this chance. And exactly because I was close with my subordinates, Qin Wu took the chance to tell his peers some things, which led to my reputation, gaining some ignominy." "An almost 20-year-old person and still unmarried," the Carpiao said, "and you spent every day flirting with these young fellows. It must have been hard to make people keep their thoughts straight." "Hey! You!" Li Jinglong almost had a heart attack from those words, and Hung Jun hurried to rub his back, asking, "What reputation gaining some ignominy? What was gained? Why is this something I can't understand again?" Li Jinglong's words once again dried up, but the Carpiao didn't stop staring judgmentally at Li Jinglong as it asked, "Was it true then? How could it be true?" Li Jinglong said, "I'm pure and innocent, and I had no uncouth intentions towards him. Everyone in the army was a handsome youth, and there was no shortage of delicately beautiful sons in the 6 armies, so naturally these youths who had yet to be wed were close with each other. But the people who joined the army were focused primarily on practicing their martial skills. Being a soldier was still a responsibility, and in the face of danger, they would pick up their weapons and die for their country. In the usual days the Longwu army was under the emperor's watchful gaze, so they definitely didn't dare to cause any havoc. Training, competing, and contending, from big events like accompanying the emperor on a hunt to small events like the drills each individual squad ran on the 1st and the 15th of each month, everyone was assigned ranks based on their performance in these things. If they were even slightly unable to keep up, they would receive abuse and ridicule and would be forced to stand under the sun in their full armor during the drills for a whole 4 shishan. With this level of difficulty, when they returned to their quarters every day, obviously they would fall down and go to sleep, so how would they have the energy to do other things? If they happened to slow the entire squad down, they could be ambushed in the night, their heads wrapped with cloth, as their peers beat them up. If the news of him being a cut sleeve spread, then he would definitely burden the entire team and become the object of ridicule of the entire army. Li Jinglong had just so happened to have rigorously instructed Qin Wu on this topic before, so he already held a little unease in his heart, and adding on to his desire to be promoted and squeeze Li Jinglong out of his spot, he caused such a ruckus. It was also the year Li Jinglong turned 18, so everything, from any sort of brotherhood to marriage offers, all disappeared just like that. How big was his grudge against you? At this, Hung Jun finally realized, the words Qin Wu had spoken today were out of the guilt in his heart. According to Li Jinglong, later Qin Wu did receive a promotion, and after hearing of the rumors, Hu Sheng had him transferred to another squad. In the days after that, the soldiers under Li Jinglong's command treated him like they would any other superior. Li Jinglong responded, "It's fine, it was foolish for me to expect sincerity from a shallow friendship, so the fault was mine alone." The Carpiao seemed to hear something odd in his tone, and the entire fish grew alert as it eyed Li Jinglong. When saying those words, Li Jinglong couldn't resist glancing at Hung Jun again, but Hung Jun was still indignant about how that matter had happened. But based on what Hung Jun knew and heard, he wouldn't think about the deeper meaning behind it. "Then did you like Qin Wu?" Hung Jun continued. "I didn't like him," Li Jinglong said crisply. "It was only because he was young, and. Li Jinglong lowered his head and mumbled to himself, "and his family was badly off, so I specially took care of him for a bit. You don't need to be angry on my behalf, I've already long since put that matter behind me, now that I've come to the exorcism department. Everyone took to it like fish to water, so naturally I wouldn't think of such matters again." Hung Jun thought about it for a while, and his final comment was, "Oh." Li Jinglong was silent for a moment. When he raised his eyes to look at Hung Jun again, Hung Jun was turning to the Carpiao and saying, "And here I thought that only males and females could do that, but it turns out that males and males can also do that. The Carpiao. Li Jinglong. The Carpiao, but males and males doing that don't produce children, and I would never do that with male fish. So how do you fish do that?" Hung Jun was very curious. This conversation grew more awkward as they continued, and Li Jinglong only wanted to quickly divert the topic when the Carpiao said, "This isn't something you need to worry about, what do you need to know that much for? But coming back to the topic, if you really like someone, then there's no way around it. Some people like to do this, some people like to do that. The human realm has always been all-inclusive like this, and so what if Li Zhenqi likes men? He doesn't need bystanders to crunch idly on radishes and worry for him. Speaking of which, Hung Jun? Didn't you like that little fox from before?" "I don't like him," Hung Jun said. "I only felt that he was pitiful." Li Jinglong immediately picked up a scroll and tossed it to Hung Jun to end this thread of conversation, saying, "Take a look. 12th year of the Tianbao era, the 5th day of the 11th month. Exorcism department case, a caravan met with some difficulty, murder case. Difficulty, herringbone level. Area, Pinghe Ridge. Involved in the case, the Western Region's Kucha Caravan 22. Details of the case. On the 5th day of the 11th month, the Kucha Caravan was passing through a branch of the Qinling Mountains, in Pinghe Liang, when they were ambushed after noon. 12 members of the group were brutally massacred, the killer is unknown, and it's suspected that a Yao caused this ruckus. This case has been transferred to the Great Tang Dynasty's Exorcism Department to be taken care of. Remuneration. Heavy gratitude and in-person thanks from the Kucha merchants and the commercial envoy who resides in Chang'an, Hanquilin. Let's go take a look." "It's too late, let's go tomorrow," Li Jinglong said. The dusk was deepening, and the autumn night was chilly. Origen and his group had already come back, and everyone sat down for dinner as they began to discuss their findings. "Where did you go play now?" Li Jinglong saw that they were unable to eat their food, so he asked that lightly. "We came across a case involving a murder of someone's wife." Origen frowned as he lifted his cup to drink some water, and he said, "A blacksmith was arguing with his wife, so he used a chisel and a metal hammer to smash her to death. That brain matter was splattered, on the wall, on the bed. Don't say any more. Chu Yangxi and A Tai immediately interrupted to stop Emorigen from recounting that scene again. It had taken them a lot of effort to forget it. At the moment, Hung Jun was drinking a bowl of crab roe soup, wholly undisturbed. A Tai then continued, and there was another case, where a patient had the flu and went to go see a doctor. The doctor was a village hack, and when he performed the bloodletting, he accidentally killed the person. The doctor ran, and the family carried the coffin to riot out in front of Chunlin Hall. Li Jinglong was still thinking of the caravan being ambushed, and he asked, "What other news is there?" "From the beginning of the month until now, all the murder cases that have happened are in these scrolls," A Tai said. "From the beginning of the 11th month until now, there have been this many homicides?" Li Jinglong asked as he put down his chopsticks. Emorigen answered, "I don't know if historically homicides were this frequent in Chang'an. Is this considered abnormal?" Chu Yangxi said, "More accurately, these homicides all happened yesterday and today. In the past 2 or 3 days, if we count in the merchant caravan, 14 people have died." Li Jinglong frowned. "It's this serious?" "A Tai, don't forget, the Yao King is still hiding somewhere. Hung Jun, is it trying to provoke us?" Li Jinglong let out a deep sigh, and his forehead wrinkled up again. He didn't respond. As such, everyone went to go sleep so that they could head out early tomorrow morning to investigate. Late at night, Hung Jun squatted by the edge of the well to rinse his mouth. The carpiao poked its head out from the pond, saying, "Hung Jun." Hung Jun turned his head, raising an eyebrow, indicating that if it had anything to say then it should speak. "The carpiao, have you ever met someone who you wish to spend your whole life with?" "What does that mean?" Hung Jun finished rinsing his mouth and sat down by the side of the pond. "It's when you want to be with her for your entire life, and you never think of leaping over the dragon gate again, merely wanting to stay with her for a lifetime until you both are old, and the day that she dies, you wish that you could go with her." The carpiao's mouth opened and closed as it said in a daze. "There is," Hung Jun smiled. "Who?" the carpiao asked. "Hung Jun, Dad, Qing Xiang." The carpiao said, "I don't mean that, whatever." The carpiao wanted to go back and sleep, but Hung Jun yanked on its tail, tugging it out, asking, "What's wrong? Tell me." The carpiao said, "When you're with her, when you're by her side, you always feel indescribably comfortable, and you don't need to think about anything." Hung Jun answered, "Li Zhenqi ba." The carpiao, "Pa." Hung Jun answered, "Zhenqi is always really dependable, and he's a good person, so all I have to do is just leave everything to him, isn't that right?" "Zhao Zilong, what is going on with you? You've been weird all day." The carpiao said, "I fell in love with a koi." "Ah?" Hung Jun asked. "What does that mean?" "I want to start a family with her," the carpiao said. "I want to never be apart." "Didn't you want to leap over the dragon gate?" Hung Jun inquired. "You're not leaping over it anymore." The carpiao leaned one arm on the bank, propping its head up with it, blowing a few bubbles, as it said, "Those words were only to comfort myself at best. We live in a society, so we all should have dreams, right? Even if that dream's something that can never be achieved." Hung Jun scratched his head and asked, "What does it mean to love?" You don't understand." The carpiao sank into the water. From under the water, it lifted his eyes to watch Hung Jun, saying nothing else. Hung Jun was just about to fish it up to continue questioning it, but a series of frantic knocks suddenly came from outside. When he opened the door, a person covered in blood rushed in, his voice trembling as he spoke, "Save me, save me. Captain! I'm sorry, save me. Qin Wu." Hung Jun startled. End chapter.